Mike, first of all, we want to welcome you back for your weekly conversation about Detroit Lions football on the Two Man Advantage podcast.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Mike, I've watched a lot of bad football with the Detroit Lions, but yesterday I think is about as bad as it's been in quite a long time.
Yeah, I don't think it gets any worse than 6 turnovers and your starting quarterback getting benched and your second overall or second round pick, getting benched as well. It was just a bad game all the way around.
And why do you think the wheels went off the train so quickly yesterday?
Well, they started out, despite the early turnovers, it seemed as though the offense was beginning to move pretty nicely down the field. And then from there, I think Stafford's second interception just kind of started to cost him some confidence. And I think that the rest of the team just went that way with them as soon as Arizona started piling on.
And when you look at what happened with Stafford yesterday, obviously the 3 turnovers and getting benched, what do you think this team is, specifically Stafford, in terms of morale moving forward to Chicago?
Well, I think Stafford's still your guy. Obviously, he's going to be the starter probably for the rest of the season, I would imagine, unless he gets hurt or something like that, which God forbid. But yeah, Stafford's the guy to go with. Orlovsky, he came in, he had a couple of decent throws yesterday, but for the most part, he was sailing them over wide receivers' heads all evening, and it was just a bad showing for just about everybody involved.
Now, when we look at what happened yesterday, obviously they started off moving the football, and obviously I don't think I've ever seen 4 turnovers in one quarter before, but it happened yesterday. So obviously the same mistakes are happening week in and week out, and we hear sort of a broken record theme with the Lions. So what do you think is the answer to fix the team?
Well, I think they need to get back on pace and figure out where the offense can go that'll help everyone figure everything out. I think maybe Jim Caldwell has lost his team a little bit, and they need all to get back on the same page and basically get that culture that helped them so much last year back into the main.
And obviously they were hanging their hat on how well the defense played in Seattle, for sacking Russell Wilson 6 times, forcing him to fumble a couple of times as well. But obviously yesterday the rails kind of went off the defense as well. And I guess a part of the problem with the defense is that the offense is so inconsistent that they feel like they have to make each and every play.
Yeah, well, when the offense can't stay on the field, it puts a little bit of extra pressure on the defense to perform a lot more than they normally would. And, of course, the offense was either turning the ball over or punting yesterday, and that really, really hurt the defense. And then, the Arizona Cardinals, this is a team that averages 37 points coming into the game. They're no slouch. They're a very tough team to deal with, and they even made Chris Johnson look like 2008 Chris Johnson yesterday, which is just bad. I think the defense, is going to be losing Levy again after he walked out of there hurt again. At a certain point, you got to wonder if they're just going to shut him down for the year and just protect their investment on that. But defense definitely needs to step up and play more like they did against Seattle and of course, as they did against their previous opponent.
No, Stafford wasn't the only one that got benched yesterday. Obviously, Amir Abdullah. We knew about the fumbling issues coming out of Nebraska, and they reared their ugly head yesterday. So what do you think the benching of both Stafford and Abdullah, what sort of a message did that send to the team? I know James Ahedebo said that was the worst football game that he's ever been associated with.
Yeah, I think the message is pretty clear. It's protect the football or you're not going to play. With Abdullah, he had these issues in college. He had a lot of fumbling issues, and it seemed as though over time he had mended that, and it wasn't going to be much of a problem. But yeah, on two big plays, he fumbles the ball. It's just not going to be good for the Lions for that to continue to happen. And then Stafford, just those two interceptions that he threw, the first two were just unbelievable. You throw the ball slightly higher and it doesn't happen, and it's disheartening to watch your quarterback play that way. And you could tell by the look on his face that he was pretty upset with himself, and he was pretty upset that nothing could go right. And when you get that way, sometimes it's hard to come back from, and you definitely saw Stafford not come back from that.
In your view, what was the most disappointing aspect of yesterday?
I think, for me personally, when Dan Orlovsky came into the game and fans began to leave the stadium, and I'm not upset that any fan leaves, obviously, but it was pretty embarrassing to watch your team play football on TV, and you could hear everything that Dan Orlovsky is saying. You could hear a pin drop in the stadium, and it was just sad. It was just sad to watch, and then it just seemed like that game would never end. Then they're kicking field goals when they're down, by 28 points. It's just bad all over. I think I've watched a lot of Detroit Lions football in my life, but this was one of the most embarrassing games I think I've ever seen.
Now, when we talk about the upper management of this team, what do you think the psyche that they're going through, and are you? I guess we're not surprised we haven't heard from the Forge because that's their MO, not to talk until the end of the season. But this thing has gotten so bad so quickly. Are you disappointed that we haven't heard from upper management, or?
Well, as we learned last week, Bill Ford Jr. isn't really doing much with the team, so it all rests on Martha's shoulders at the moment. I would like to hear something from her. I think the fans deserve to hear something from her, even if it's just a quick apology or something. As far as Mayhew and Lewan go, I honestly can't look at this 0-5 start and see how they wind up keeping their jobs after this year, unless the Lions go on a miraculous 11-game win streak, which if you watched yesterday, you could see that's not going to happen.
Not anytime soon.
Not anytime soon, no. I think Martin Mayhew is probably beginning to pack up his office, and you hate to see anybody lose their jobs, but you've got to. This is a performance-based business, and you've got to perform. And he's shown so far that he cannot build this team correctly, and he's losing draft picks every year, and he can't put a system that's going to protect Matthew Stafford in place, and that's also going to play to Stafford's strengths. And how long can you really wait?
Now, you sort of touched on my next question. After the game, Golden Tate said it's on the players, it's not on upper management, and they have to take accountability. But at some point, there has to be a level of accountability on the field as well. And I think, in a small measure, you saw that yesterday with the benching. But for this season, do you think this season or team can be salvaged in any way, or do you think it's a lost cause?
Well, I think at this point, the best way to salvage anything is to just simply win a game. I think that's you'll get some of the fan base back when you win, and that'll kind of make things a little bit better. And the good news is they've got a pretty good little stretch here of winnable games. It's going to take a miracle for the Lions to make it to the playoffs this year, and I don't think that this miracle can happen. No 0-5 team has ever made the playoffs in NFL history, and the Detroit Lions do not look like the kind of team that can make that all of a sudden happen. I think you're going to be looking at a 5-11, 6-10 football team, probably maybe in the top 10 draft picks next year.
Now, you had mentioned Mayhew and how you think he won't be back next year, and I tend to agree with you. Does that mean the same for Caldwell? Because if we get rid of Mayhew, obviously, any new general manager that comes in will want their own guy as well.
Yeah, I think that this starts at the top and works its way down, and I do believe that the staff is probably going to be part of that as well. I would not be surprised to see a completely new coaching staff in Detroit next year, and honestly, I think Kyle Shanahan is going to be a guy that they are going to be clamoring for after what he's done to Atlanta's offense so far. I know Joe Philbin is another guy as far as an offensive coordinator. Who's been brought up after what he's done in Green Bay. I think the staff is going to be gone, and they're going to be looking at a whole new setup there.
Now, when we look at the remainder of this season, what are some indicators that you'll be looking for to indicate progress, or do you think this season is completely lost?
Well, I at this point, I think this season's is pretty much lost. You'll look for the positives in the young guys. You want to see them improve and be ready for next year. Eric Ebron coming back, I'm going to be looking for him to have a better year, as well as that offensive line, which is still young. I'm going to be looking for them to gel and figure out how to protect the quarterback, and hopefully that can translate into a better season next year. But as a Lions fan, this isn't just my job. I would love to see the Lions pull off a miracle. I'm right there with everybody. I just don't see it happening.
Now, before we went into the season, the Lions were talking about how they were going to build on the success of last year and how they finally felt they had turned the corner. What do you think went totally wrong, and how do you think they misjudged this so badly?
Well, I think the early indication that things were going wrong was in week one, when you could tell that no adjustments were being made on the offensive side of the ball. And, any coaching staff would take a look at that and make the changes necessary for week two. But here we are in week 5, and they're still running the same dink and dunk offense that's just not doing anything for their quarterback, who's getting laid to waste on all these hits and hurries and sacks, and it's really affecting his play. And obviously there's a lot of fans that want to go ahead and throw the entire blame on the quarterback, but I think you got to throw the blame on the whole team and the entire staff and really the whole organization after yesterday's loss in this 0-5 start. But
now, do you think Jim Caldwell will survive the season, or do you think we'll have a similar situation as they did in Miami?
Well, I think, when you fire a coach midway through the season or early in the season, it's a pretty rare thing. I would not be surprised to see Caldwell finish the year out. If anything, I think that they might, if they decide to let Caldwell go, then Terrell Austin will probably take over as the head coach in an interim role. But, I would say most likely Caldwell stays the entire year.
Now, I know that the Bears have won 2 consecutive games. They pulled one out against Kansas City, and they found a way to beat a bad Raiders team. But if the Lions are going to win any of the early season games, this one would seem to be their best shot, don't you think?
I would say so. It's really going to depend on if the Lions can band together. And at this point, I think any team can beat the Lions. The good news for Detroit is that Alshon Jeffrey is out still, and Eddie Royal is as well. The Bears are kind of lacking on offense, and I don't want to discount the Bears' win because it was a nice comeback, but I think if Jamal Charles plays that entire game, the Bears might have lost. But when Charles goes down, Chiefs lose their entire offense. And Chiefs actually are a team that the Lions are going to be playing here in a couple weeks. So.
In London, yeah.
Yeah.
So finally, Mike, what do you think we should be looking for throughout the duration of this season in terms of looking towards because obviously, as you mentioned before, no 0-5 team has made the playoffs. So besides the young rookies, what do you think we should see from Stafford for the rest of the season and from the older veterans who are still playing for a job on this club?
Well, yeah, you're gonna be looking at Stafford continuing to form a relationship with guys like Golden Tate or Lance Moore. Well, actually, Lance Moore probably won't be here next year either. But guys like Eric Ebron, definitely Amir Abdullah, Theo Riddick, continuing to form a rapport with them and building more trust there. And as far as the veterans on either side of the ball, I think you're going to be looking for them to be auditioning for a job next year somewhere else, probably somewhere where they can maybe win a championship. But like Haloti Ngata, I don't see any way that Haloti Ngata returns to Detroit next year, and I think it's probably best for both parties if they split ways.
And looking forward into the draft, assuming the Lions continue on this current trend, they'll obviously have a top 10 pick. So what do you think they should be looking forward to improve in terms of the draft?
Well, I think early on they're probably going to be looking for an offensive lineman, maybe somebody they can put in at left tackle and move Riley Reef over to right tackle. That's a spot that they've definitely lacked in. The guards, if they can keep Larry Warford healthy, and Laken Tomlinson is going to be somebody that is going to be quite an asset in the coming years. But I think they're going to go offensive line that first round, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them take a defensive lineman in the second round.
And finally, Mike, what do you expect to happen on Sunday against the Bears?
Well, it really depends on which team comes to Detroit. If it's going to be the Lions that play the first quarter against San Diego, or if it's going to be the Lions that play 4 quarters against Arizona, I like to say that the Lions are going to win this game, and I think if you'd asked me last week before this Arizona game, I would have said this is a lock in Detroit's favor. Right now, I just don't know. I'm going to tentatively say that Detroit figures out how to win this game, but I would not be surprised if Chicago comes into town and pulls out a win.
All right, Mike, we want to thank you for your time this afternoon and for joining us to preview what's coming up against the Bears and recapping a debacle against the Cardinals. Have a great week, Mike, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Kevin.
Bye-bye.